Welcome, this is Pineleaf Needles, and this is LOTRO Players News, where we take a look at LOTRO and the latest news at LOTRO Players. Today we have with us a small but vigorous cast with Etheros
Hello.
and Andang.
Hey everybody, we may be small, but we're more excited than ever because the NDA is down.
Right, and we'll talk more about that later. But first we will start with an IGN video of the epic battle system.
Yeah, this was a fairly lengthy video looking with some of the devs looking through Helm's Deep, the epic battle system, and it was not really anything we didn't already know, but IGN is a very broad audience, so it's very good that LOTRO got a 40-minute video onto IGN. That takes a lot of effort, so great job on their part.
All right. Anything in there that struck you, or did you just say nothing particular?
If you haven't been following it closely, then there's a lot of repeated information, but nothing that's terribly new. If you haven't seen the epic battles, then you can watch their video and see the system through that.
So I have a feeling you might be plugging some other videos too.
Well, that might happen later on,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes. Very well.
I think if you're looking for a thorough visual uh, overview of epic battles, then this is probably one of the videos to check out.
Yeah.
Very, very well. Now they at Turbine released a West Rohan region developer diary where they look around each of the various areas within the Western Rohan.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was a good diary.
there isn't much to be said there. I really like this diary because it lets the developers for each of the different subregions talk about how they developed it and a bit of the story behind each area. The other thing they bring up is the Tolkien influence, and obviously with Rohan, it's pretty much more Tolkien than we've ever had before.
Right, because it's been a long time since we've had an area that was where the Fellowship passed through, not since. Well, okay, they did pass through the Great River, for example, but we weren't there with the Fellowship. We were sort of following on their heel steps there. But here, the Fellowship spends a lot of time there in Rohan. There's a lot of description on it. There's this big, huge battle there, and a good number of chapters take place in this area.
Yeah, and the images here especially, I have to say, were just fantastic. Some of the best images that Turbine's released this whole expansion cycle.
Right.
Yeah.
And in fact, I was going to say just about the entirety of Book 3, which is the first half of the Two Towers, takes place in Western Rohan, or in Rohan in general, but most of it's in Western.
They have a lot of ground to cover, and they won't even get to it all with this expansion, at least at launch. So they have a lot, a lot of story to get through.
I am glad they made a diary like this because I think personally the content and landscape developers are the most underrated on the entire team.
And that probably takes a great deal of work in order to meticulously make a landscape.
Yeah, and they had to take tons of screenshots to get the ones that are this high quality, so definitely a lot of work that went into this.
And if you like looking for things, the Buried Treasure Hunt is back, and it'll probably be back until we post this episode.
Yeah, pretty much.
But if you're listening to it live, or actually this might be a reason why you should listen to our show live, is because if you do, then you'll be able to catch events like this before they disappear over the weekend.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, definitely a good thing.
Have either of you two participated in the treasure hunt?
No, but I was watching Sprydra do it earlier today, and she enjoyed it enough. One bad thing, I did it in the past, and it's still the same where you have to they don't give you enough picks and stuff to make it allow you to spend as much time as you might want to without spending turbine points. So it's just a minor little thing.
Yeah. Well,
As for
it's
me, I pretty much just ignore festivals.
yeah. Well, this particular one, I have not done it since I believe it was way back the first time they ever tested. This was on Bull Roar during, I think it was during the beta of one of the
It
expansions.
was, yep.
And I tried running it a little bit then, and it didn't excite me enough in order to actually try it on live.
It hasn't gotten much better.
Yes. And we also have a new app for the iOS, the LOTRO Complete app.
Yes, and I'd have to give a big thanks to the developers of the app who responded within like an hour of my email asking for some images and a little bit short thing about it so that I could feature it on the site. And the main thing that I love about this app is it brings a lot of the things that are kind of spread out on Turbine's website and puts them all together right into your phone in a nice, easy, well-organized app. And as many of you know, I'm a big fan of maps, and it has every single map I think that is in Lotro is in this thing, and I believe it was like 60 maps total, and it's just really cool to have all the maps in your
Yes,
pocket at any time to pull out when you might need them. Although I
class
don't
inf-
know
yeah,
when I
right.
might need them.
Let's see. Class information, trait guides, crafting guides, raid guides. I guess it's under more guides.
Yeah, it's under
Oh
more
yeah.
guides.
Game maps, fishing guide, monster player guides, and about deeds. All right, that could be so. Yeah, so you can have
Yeah,
maps for
there's a
everything.
lot of good information. Yep.
Oh my goodness gracious! I see what you're talking about. I haven't had a chance to really explore all this well, but
But we're doing it live.
yes. So I'll have a nice look at that more when I have time, or when I desperately need a map and I can't get it in game. All right.
Episode 20. Listen to Pineleaf talk about an app that he's never been on before for hours on end.
Let's go to the store sales. Our free sample for this week is a black die. Use coupon code STYLE4. And when I say a black die, I mean something for dyeing clothes and not something that you roll for a random number generator.
And the guy made a good code, so great job.
Yes, a nice stylish code, and that is something that one of my lore masters really should grab since they're the ones who like to wear black.
Hmm.
We also have 25% off Virtues, Virtue bundles, trait slots, plus 5 Hope Boost, and enhanced XP supply.
Um, I'm not sure the trait slots thing is necessary.
Oh, that wasn't good. He was trying to say that I guess he was trying to, oh, here he's back. He'll say something
Okay,
for
never
himself.
mind.
All right, what about trait slots?
I was just saying that with the obviously the go move to trait trees, I'm not necessarily sure that having them there is a good idea, unless they want them just for the virtue slots.
Well, there is a little bit. Well, they will still be around for the virtue slots, and they, I believe, based on one of the answers in the very first announcement that they made, that the number of traits you have on the left side, the ones that you gain when you advance in the trees, I
Yeah.
believe those traits are limited by the number of class and legendary slots that you have.
Oh, that's an interesting way of doing it.
Yes, because
It would seem to be less restrictive because you have all the actual trait points to spend still.
right, you still have the trait points in which to spend on that, and those aren't limited by that, but the ones on the left, I believe, are limited by the number of slots you have. But I've not tried beta with a free or premium account, so I've not tested that.
Hmm.
We also have them for, after I said +5 hope boosts and enhanced XP supply. And remember that the 25% off XP disabler until November 17th, which means one more week on this. Now for the LOTRO players news, and just about all our news for this week is related to one big item, and that is the Helm's Deep NDA drop and the stuff we've shared with you as a result of that. Because much of this stuff last week we wouldn't have been able to post.
Spoilers, guys. We were in the beta.
Yes, if you haven't figured that out yet. So therefore, we have made a large number of posts where we look at various things. For example, Andane created videos for each of the 5 epic battles.
Yeah, I went through with Athelros and got all the epic battles done. We'd already done several of the battles beforehand, so we had good experience, and a lot of people have been thanking us for the information that we've been giving. It's very basic information, but that's what's needed right now, I guess. So um, thank you everyone for watching those, giving feedback. It got featured by Massively. And so, yeah, thank you everyone for your support on that. And let's go ahead and actually go into our beta discussion about the epic battles. So, first of all, let's talk about if they're fun or not. Let's go around the table here. So, Pineleaf, are epic battles, in your opinion, fun?
See, I'm trying to how to describe what's fun and what isn't. I would say that they overall are. Currently, I still also feel like they're quite challenging in some ways because you're trying to do all this stuff at once, and you generally have to make a choice as to what you really want to do and what you don't. And I'm still trying to feeling my way around the dark in some of them.
Okay, Athelros?
For me, they aren't fun as a whole. I'm not. I would say they're not as repeatable in a way that skirmishes are. I mean, I wouldn't be able to. I don't think I'd have the energy to do them over and over like I can with skirmishes. There's a lot more to them, but yeah, overall, I would say they're fun, especially when we're with more people because there's just so many different things you can do in it to contribute.
Yeah, and I'd consider them fun. Especially if you switch around your roles. If you don't just stay in like the same role, which we'll talk about later, I guess, going into what those actually are. But if you don't just stay in the same role and you actually switch up what you're doing, it does become a lot more fun and diverse, I think. And so there's definitely a lot of depth built into it, and I'd argue that there's actually more depth than there are skirmishes. It's just that there's less epic battles. So it's like if you had 5 skirmishes total instead of all the skirmishes that you have and all the diversity that's there.
Well, let's face it, when you start out, when you're level 20, you only have 3 skirmishes, and that even assumes that you purchased the 3rd.
Yeah, and I think that's why a lot of people don't necessarily like skirmishes, because those aren't necessarily my favorite skirmishes to do. So, but back to epic battles. So it's hard to describe because there's so much going on at any given moment. Let's just go ahead and go and dissect each part a little bit. So there's 3 different roles that you can take in epic battles. There's the siege guy, which his name
The
slips me.
engineer.
The engineer. And then there's the vanguard who does DPS, lots and lots of DPS. And let's back up to the engineer first. I'm getting ahead of myself. So the engineer, his main task is to he can fire catapults a lot quicker and handle siege equipment much quicker. He can knock down ladders much quicker, and he can do a lot of different tasks at a much faster rate. And this allows him to be really effective on the 2 wall skirmishes, because at those 2 places you have to take down enemy catapults and actually fire catapults at the enemy. to make sure that you take them down, because otherwise you're going to have a really high chance of losing if they're continually able to fire these massive projectiles at the wall. And there's also, you have to worry about the ladders and have constantly be managing the ladders to make sure that there aren't too many enemies climbing up onto your wall, because then it can easily get overrun. If you do take out too many ladders, though, then you won't have the proper flow, and it can make the battle be a lot longer. And so you have to kind of, once you get up into higher engineering, you have to kind of find a balance between how many ladders you actually take down and all that stuff to be able to get the highest score possible.
Yes, but if you're doing it solo and your engineering is only about rank 1 or 2, you're probably not going to do it too fast with it. But if you've got 2 engineers kicking them down quickly and they're rank 4,
Yeah, it can go very quickly.
You even noticed that in some of our videos, the Deeping Wall especially, we were keeping the ladders and hooks down quite effectively.
Yeah, and
We
I
had
wasn't
about,
even.
what, 2 or 3?
Yeah, and on the second one, I wasn't even really focusing on the ladders. It was pretty much just you, and I was focusing more on AOE stuff, and we seemed to still be able to do fine. So that just shows you how much those upgrades actually matter. And that's something worth mentioning, I guess, is that these upgrades, you start out really, really weak, but you level really powerful really quickly. And then it's kind of becomes a snowball effect as you continue on and are able to get objectives. And yeah, it really transforms that way. And then Etheros, you did the officer a little bit. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
I did play around with it a bit. I didn't have as much experience with the engineer, but basically how it works is kind of like the captain in the sense that your role is more helping your fellow soldiers. Most of the emphasis is on reducing cooldowns and increasing the potency of the commander buffs, the heal, damage, haste, and armor and such. There are also other functions you can have to give target priority. So say there's a certain side objective that has sappers coming in, like the powder at the gate one for Dyke. You can set them to target sappers as priority, and they will target those if any of them are in the vicinity. There are also other things where you can have them change their weaponry, so you can have them go two-handers to do more damage but take more, or the opposite if you want sword and shield, that sort of thing. And there are also like miscellaneous abilities like being able to put a mark on someone and have that target be the priority above their all else. So, for example, the trolls in the dike, I think it's the one for the statue, you can have put the mark on them and all the soldiers should go after it. It's that sort of thing, and there are also things like banners you can put down to buff your teammates. It's very captain-y.
Yeah, it is definitely a captain role, which makes sense because it's the officer. So I think captains would really love going into that role. And someone did ask in the chat, how is the lag in epic battles? Surprisingly, there's not that much lag in epic battles. I don't
yeah, I
know.
didn't notice any.
I don't know how Turbine. Even when we did our raid in the beta, both the pug and both the well organized one didn't have much lag at all. So it's not really an issue, thankfully. In the fifth battle, when you have those 30,000 orcs out in the field, it does get a little bit laggy, but nothing near what you would expect. So it's not that bad. And then back to the third one. The basically for every kill that he does on the enemy, he gets a point to spend on these special skills. He gets a special skill bar, and all the classes get their own, or all the new battle lines get their own little pop-up bar that has different things you can do. And with the Vanguard, you get these special skills, and you can also get extra damage boosts and stuff like that. So it's great for AoE or really strong single target classes. Or if you could also do it the opposite way. If you're really, really weak at that type of combat and you're going for, I don't know what else you'd be going for, but if you're really weak with your DPS, you could go into Vanguard and be able to do better DPS with these extra skills. So There's a lot of
Yeah.
different ways that it could be effective. But
Well, yeah.
or go ahead, Pineleaf.
Yeah, but Vanguard might be a little bit tough if you're level 10.
Yeah, I was getting ready to say I'd really recommend people at least balancing currently on beta. This could totally change, but currently the engineer is the easiest one, I'd say, to get you through epic battles,
Yeah,
especially
I
once
definitely agree with that.
you get to rank 1 and you get their special traps, which is something we didn't cover. The traps actually, there's 3 different kinds. There's one that does damage over time. There's a bear trap that does real quick damage. And then there's also a stun trap. And the stun trap is probably the most overpowered thing out of the 3. And you actually have a very small induction time, and you're able to place it down anywhere on the battlefield within reason. And you can actually place it in the middle of a group of enemies, so you can actually stun. The most I've actually stunned, I think, at once was actually 20 enemies, all at once, kneeling down,
Yeah,
and yeah, it's very effective.
definitely
Yeah.
recommend that for a low level or poorly geared person because the damage coming from it, for example, the placeable siege equipment, like the small blister I used a couple of times, isn't based on your damage, as far as I'm aware. So even if you're level 10, you can still kill things quite effectively with them.
Yep. And I don't know, epic battles might not be as epic as some players want them to be, but considering that it's Turbine's first large-scale conflict of any kind, really, these are pretty impressive, I'd say. Um, and at the end of the day, all that really matters is that they're fun, at least, especially with friends, as long as you have an ally with you. And that's all that matters at the end of the day, in my opinion, is having really, really fun gameplay mechanics. As a side note, I don't know why the epic story or why the epic battle system is part of the epic story. Makes no sense at all to me. I understand that there's a story around it and they're crafting stuff, but in the actual battle, there's not really any epic story stuff at all.
Yeah, I
And
think
so that kind of annoys me a little bit, knowing that you're having to pay for the epic story now.
I think for me at least, my biggest overall problem with the epic battle system is the group restrictions more than anything else. I mean, you have all of them
Yes.
can be solo duoed. There's like one 3-man, one 6-man, and one 12-man. That just seems too few. There should be. I think all of them at least have the potential to be a 3-man, in my
And
opinion.
and I'm hoping that they'll expand it later. I'm not counting on it by any means, but I'm
Yeah.
hoping that they'll expand it later and add in those other sizes because that would help out a lot. One problem is though is that they're building them from the ground up. In the raid, instead of having one catapult firing at you, you have I think it was like 6. So you have 6 catapults firing at you at once, and that becomes a very devastating thing. So you have to make sure in the raids, especially, that you have plenty of people on the catapults. And that's another thing,
Yeah.
actually, is that you can interact. Multiple people can interact with the single object, which you mentioned in a previous week. But it is a lot of fun to manage siege equipment with another player. It'd be a lot more boring, I think, by yourself. So
Yeah, that
Especially the
was.
catapults, which are very slow. And let's face it, catapults were designed to be done by many people. Actually, technically, so were ballistae, but
right, but
catapults even more so.
as a side
I
note, though,
think.
when you upgrade your skills, it really isn't that long of a time. So
Even
when you get
single?
higher up, you don't necessarily need another player, but at the beginning, definitely need another player helping you out.
I think of all the new mechanics they've brought in with epic battles, I think being able to interact with the same object and help each other is my favorite. Not just using the same thing to make it go faster, but you doing different things on the same object, like the catapult you can load and turn it and crank it at the same time, and it works quite smoothly.
Yeah, I hope they think about that. They don't just use this mechanic when it comes up again. I hope they actually look out and think of where they actually could implement this, because there's a lot of possibilities I think that this could open up for LOTRO and for other MMOs, and so definitely a great system. All right, anything else on Epic Battles?
No, I think just the summary is it has a very good foundation. There is still some work to be done, but it is a good start.
Yep.
Yeah, I think uh, really work hard and try to make the better systems. I think when we get to Minas Tirith, there could be some really good. This could be a really good system by the point it gets there. This is just
Yeah.
the first implementation. It's kind of sad that they had to wait until Helm's Deep to get it going. I think if they did a smaller battle somewhere with this system and then did Helm's Deep, it might be better. But it's definitely a great start.
Well, I have a feeling that the we're coming up with the ideas on how to do it, because their first draft of what became Big Battles was obviously Wolf's Cleft, and it didn't work out all that well. So they
Right, it wasn't.
found another. So it was a very, very early first draft, so to speak,
Yeah,
and they eventually found a better way of doing it.
right. All right, so class changes. This is the thing that affects everyone with Helm's Deep. Uh, buy the expansion or not, class changes are coming. And they, in no way, are small changes. Every class is being rehauled and completely transformed. There's
I'm not
still
going
the
to say
essence there.
completely transformed.
True, there's still the essence there, but these are really, really big changes. More than we've seen at any point of class changes before on any other class, and they're happening to all the classes at once. There's been a ton of work that has gone into this. I've been impressed by Turbine's um, amount of work that they've been putting in, and amount that they've been actually listening to players and working with them and trying to make the classes as good as possible. And so, what do you guys think as far as the how Turbine's been working with players and listening to them or not listening to them?
I think, I mean, I've been browsing the forums for a lot of different classes, even the ones I don't play, and I can say that certain devs have been incredibly responsive with obviously communication and everything. RockX especially, I would name him. And then there are other ones who I think have been a bit more patchy on it. Overall, it's been good, but there have been times when it would have liked to have been heard more at a time when it needed it.
Well, the problem is some of the devs don't want to be distracted with the forums, and by responding to the forums when they could be
Well, there's
doing
that,
the
but
stuff.
in
Yeah.
a lot of ways, you can look at the patch notes and you can see who's been communicating and who hasn't, because the ones who have a much larger list of changes generally.
Okay, you do have a point with that.
Yeah. Um, I suppose it's worth mentioning that the consensus right now is, for the most part, is that the captain is possibly in the worst place right now as far as the different classes go. Um, if you are a captain, just go into these changes knowing that it's going to be very, very different, um, and just be prepared. I know the video that we posted, which is something we didn't mention, but we do have videos for all the different classes that are going to be changed from different YouTubers and including the Lotro players staff as well. Just because we can't cover all those in a week, because that would be a lot of work. But thankfully, there are plenty knowledgeable people out there. And the captain was actually one that we pulled from the YouTube community. and she actually really liked the changes, and so it was encouraging to hear that because I'd before that point hadn't heard any captain that actually liked the changes. So they might not be that bad, but I would still go in there with caution, and that goes for all the classes. I'd go in with caution, expecting changes and have an open mind. You're not going to have the same build. No class will have the exact same build, that's for sure. There will not still be
Yeah.
the same rotation or anything like that. On the champion, 50% of the skills are completely new, and all the skills have been changed to some extent. And that shows you how extensive these changes are, I think.
Yeah, I think the Warden probably had fewer. There are a few new skills in there, but most of what's in the Warden is pretty much the same, at least to me.
Yeah,
Okay,
the
that's
Law
good.
Master is like that too, I think. The basic skill rotation is still there, at least for DPS. You have the same usual skills you resort to. The difference is that a few of the skills you might not have used so often are gone, and there's like a couple of new additions.
Right, but
The,
if you
I
never
say
use them,
about, yeah, 80-90% of the skills for the Law Master is the same. You won't feel a drastic change in rotation or anything, for that class at least.
Okay, that's good. But I do know.
Unless you're doing yellow. That one is just way different.
Okay, and someone asked in the chat, Blackjack asked, do the class changes make it feel like a new game?
Well, I already responded there, but I'll say it here too. For my class, no, not really. It feels different to an extent, but it still feels like LOTRO to me.
Okay, Pine Leaf.
yeah. Well, the one that I spent the most time on is, surprise, surprise, the Warden. And I didn't feel that there was enough that was different to say that it's a whole new game because I'm still playing the Warden, and the Warden is quite different from most of the other classes.
Right.
The I also spent some time with my Minstrel, and yes, still feels like a Minstrel. I think that the changes that were with the Minstrel when they introduced codas in the first place was a more extensive class change from, in my opinion, than this from their point of view.
Oh,
Yes,
interesting.
I could see that they are splitting the items based on how you set up your trees, and that you now have all three stances in real, and your default stance is now based on how you're traded. Believe me, that is so thankful because I was tired that whenever your minstrel goes down, you pop back up in probably the stance that you don't want in the past.
Okay, and you also did the burglar that. Hey, what? I haven't watched it yet even. So, what are your thoughts on that class?
With the burglar, probably the biggest change that will affect me is that I very often spent, especially in skirmishes, my time in mischief mode. And when you were in mischief with the burglar, you were not allowed to stealth at all. You didn't have access to it at all. Under the changes, you're allowed to use stealth. The thing is, though, it's super expensive in order to get stealth level upgrades because
Okay, so
the
it's not
stealth.
early on then.
Well, no, it's early on, but it's 2 points per level. While the other two lines each have access to 1 point per level upgrades. So,
Okay.
so you can do it because you could probably get a couple of them because it'll cost you for up to five levels from one of the lines. You could, all right, that's 2 points a pop, so it could cost
So
you
you're
10
having
points
to
there.
invest in another line, is what you're saying,
Oh yes,
to get
because
stealth. Yeah,
yeah,
that wasn't
well,
necessarily clear when you went through
yeah,
that, so I was
you
just making
have
sure.
stealth. You have the baseline stealth. You just don't get the bonus levels to make you harder to detect
Okay,
unless you put
gotcha.
points into one of the other two lines.
Okay, that's better than no stealth though.
Oh yes, it's better than the current situation of no stealth, quite for sure. And if you're in mischief, you don't need it that much. Now, one of the things that is concerned is how deep, even within the mischief line, it is before you get the 30-second cooldown on Riddle. I can't remember how how deep the trading was in the past. I think it was just a single item. I can't remember what level it was for. But that is something that I find very useful in mischief, and you have to be. I think it was like about fourth line in before I was able to get that particular feature.
Okay. What about the other two lines?
The other two lines, which are of course are the Gambler and the Quiet Knife, the Gambler seems to be the one that's changed the most. I'm actually starting to be able to understand the Gambler line a little bit more along the new system. Because the old system, it was hard to tell exactly what the Gambler line did.
Yeah, I know from Sprydra that she said it was hard to tell that. Yeah.
Yes, and now you have all these items in here, then it's a lot. Now you can see what this line is doing because you have all these traits that are within the tree, and it's a lot more obvious to it. So I think that's going to breathe a lot of life into the Gambler line. And I suspect that what I'm going to do is that I'm going to use, since you get two trait trees that you can without spending Mythril coins, is that I'll probably use one of the trees for Mischief and the other one for Gambler. So I suspect that many burglars out there are going to be winning the Quiet Knife because I know that's a favorite of most burglars.
Okay. And the champion is the other class that we here know about. And so I'm going to go ahead and talk about that. The champion had a lot of changes and a lot of iterations throughout beta. At a lot weaker than he was before. And I was happy about that until they made him much weaker in Build 4 to the point where he almost couldn't do anything. Luckily in Build 5 they found a great, actually really close to where he is on live as far as the amount of damage and tanking and stuff like that that he's doing at any given time, from my experience at least. And in Redline, what happens is now everything is super quick. In Redline, your animations go much faster, and you do damage a lot quicker as well, which those two go hand in hand. And you do a lot of damage really quickly, and it's good to see because it's really good to have that kind of damage in Redline, because with these changes, which is something I don't know that we've necessarily talked about, you can't invest as much into other lines unless you pick from the start to be like a middle ground kind of person. And so that forces you to really focus in one path. And with Redline, that allows you to be more powerful at that, but obviously you lose your some of your tanking abilities, and then also some of your AoE abilities. In fact, in Redline, I think you do almost no AoE damage, but you can invest in the yellow line after you invest a lot in Redline to get those extra AoE buffs. But just by picking a tree, at least in the champion line, is what defines you most. The tree choice gives you a lot of back-end bonuses.
I think that sounds like the major change from live, in that, from what I've heard, you can do almost as much AoE DPS in the red line as you could in yellow, which made going yellow quite pointless since a single target is obviously much better in red.
Right, and now it's not the case. And so in yellow line, you're actually able to do fantastic AoE damage, plus they actually gave you, I think it's the capstone skill, a really great single target DPS skill that does a lot of damage. So if you invest really heavily in yellow line, you get all these AoE skills, plus you get a nice little single target damage skill as well at the very end, which is nice. And I think it actually gives buffs to your AoE skills as well, so that you're not just wasting it on a single target if you really want to be AoE the whole time. And then blue line, the tanking line, is now more effective than it was before. Not by a whole lot, but blue line feels the most to my champion on live, which is interesting because I wasn't invested in blue at all. But it probably feels the most like that. Now I have invested in blue in the past and have gone into each of the builds, and blue line feels to me at least the most. And about the new threat changes. When I was in blue line, at least they might have changed it since then, but this was in build 4, I think. Brax could not steal aggro off of me. Threat system allows you to hold aggro as a tank. The tanking line, you hold aggro really, really well. And that's good because that causes you to have more command over the battlefield, and allows it makes it to where a hunter doesn't have to hold back anymore. He doesn't have to only press a couple skills when he's fighting a certain boss. He can now actually open up a little bit. He doesn't want to open it up too much because you can still steal aggro, but he can be a lot more effective, and so the hunter doesn't necessarily feel in certain fights like he's kind of wasting his time a little bit because he's getting so much aggro. That's not the case anymore. So that's good news in my opinion.
I really can't say anything about the threat changes because I still don't understand them any more than I understood the old system. Unless there's some really intricate dev diary that they released that I completely missed, I have no understanding of the new system whatsoever.
Yeah, they haven't really talked about it.
The one single change I can claim to have noticed is that my bear can tank very well now, and I'm not sure whether that's due to the bear changes and the pet changes in general, or to the threat changes. So
yeah, it's a little bit hard to tell on that, but the main thing that I've noticed is that now if you're in a tanking stance, you tank really well. And you don't have to worry about pulling aggro as much. You still have to do it every now and then if they, really go after and do a lot more. But it's not like it was before, where a hunter can just, shoot one shot and all of a sudden they have aggro because they pressed the wrong button. That's not going to happen, and so that's a lot better for pugs and things like that. It allows that to be much more effective. So yeah, I like the threat changes, in my opinion at least. All right, anything else on class changes?
Nope.
Okay.
other
Finally,
than the
you
fact
added a
that
section.
Sikkim is probably the best skill they've ever added to the game.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and talk about that a little bit?
Basically, Sikkim is the blue line capstone, which is the pet line for the Lawmaster. And basically what it does is that it summons all the pets that you're able to summon
Overpowered!
at once.
Sorry about
For a short duration, I think it's currently 20 seconds with a 2-minute cooldown. And you get an additional skill that lets you direct all those pets to attack the enemy. I have fought Andang a few times with them, and they, as of the last build, they just do so much damage it pretty much destroyed him before he had time to react.
Yeah, I'd say that they're overpowered. I hope at the very least that they're not able to be used in PvP, because they basically one-shotted my champion.
Yes, but when was that?
And that was when my champion
That was the most recent build.
That was the
Are
most
you
recent
sure?
build.
Because there was a new build on, I think it was on Tuesday or something like that.
It didn't change the skill that much, though.
Okay.
But it basically one-shot my one-shot my champion in tanking stance, and that is the stance that I'm supposed to be able to take the most damage, and so that is really overpowered. And I love the idea behind the skill. I absolutely love it, but it might need to do a little bit less damage.
Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to that because, frankly, there just needs to be that much focus with it. It's like you summon them and say, "Go kill that thing," and that's what they do. There isn't a tactic to using them, really. No strategy in that way.
It's just like an I win button, really.
Yeah, pretty much.
Kill and dang.
which is not necessarily fun. When I had on my champion, when they introduced War Steeds back with Riders of Rohan, I had a skill that let me one-shot enemies, and it had no cooldown, so I could just target, kill, target, kill, target, kill. And so I'd be ravaging the landscapes of Rohan, and at the time, I also may or may not have ravaged Lothlorien on my mount, because you could actually do that back then. But that's besides the point, Galadriel. Um, but yeah, it's not as fun when you have an I win button. It kind of trivializes the game. And if you know that you can always win going into a fight, what's the point of fighting? So that's just my little 2 cents, but I'm sure that they'll figure it out because there's still plenty of time to balance it, and I'm sure that we are going to be having balance changes on epic battles and class changes for months to come after release, because there's going to be a lot going on. And probably until a year from now, we will not really know if class changes were effective or not. Because one thing that we didn't really go into was that with these changes, they are essentially bringing the game back to the drawing board with the system. And now there's these tree systems, and you have about the same number of skills in one tree line that you did at level 50 or 60, somewhere in there. The thing that this allows them to do is to expand upon that, because really since level 60, most classes have not gotten very exciting skills, and if they have, it's just been one every 5 levels or so. What these changes allow them to do is, with every expansion, provide hopefully, we don't know for sure until we actually forward, but hopefully it allows them to add new exciting skills into each tree, and also they can change the amount of points that you need to invest into certain things and get upgrades. And so this can allow for the classes to be the best of the best and feel like that they are the best of the best at cap, as opposed to at level 60, and then get a little bit more powerful from beyond there. That's just my take on it.
More than anything else, these revamps are changes for the long term.
Yeah, I think by the time
some of the other changes they had in previous expansions.
I think by the time we're at Mordor, even Gondor, these changes will boast the one tree that you invest in will be close to what your character is currently able to do at 85, as far as the amount of stuff that you're able to invest in and all that stuff. And so I'm imagining that there will be that number of skills at 85. We'll have to wait and see. But assuming that they keep the trait investment numbers, that just by sheer numbers. So.
Yeah. I think really my biggest annoyance with character progression as a whole at this point isn't actually to do with classes, it's to do with the legendary item system, and I've talked about that before. It's just not fun more than anything else, and I think that is the biggest problem with character progression at this point.
I'm actually a fan of the legendary item system, but I think it could be greatly improved. And I think that it will probably... It's getting close, if not already, the part of the game that could use the most improvement, and it definitely could use improvement, but at the same time, I do like the system. The one thing that I do wish is that they would change it from getting a new legendary item every 2 levels or whatever that you find it. At least on my sword for my champion, every 2 levels I'm typically getting a new legendary item. And if they would change it to where you only had one legendary item, or maybe one every 10 levels or something, so each new expansion at the cap you get your new legendary item, that would be a big improvement over what it is now, because I don't have any attachment to my weapon at all. That's not at all how Tolkien works. That's not at all how medieval ideas work. And that's not at all how a lot of games work. When you get a weapon, it should be the most exciting thing ever, especially if it's a legendary weapon. And currently, I could care less. It's just a thing that I'm throwing into my inventory, really.
Yeah, they
That
sort of
one,
make a
yeah.
joke at that even in the when the Moria epilogue, no, Mirkwood epilogues, where it says, "What'd you think about that great legendary item that we found?" What do you mean you threw it away?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
it's that, and the thing that really bugs me about Helm's Deep and Allies in particular is that some of the changes they made, I think it was 2 years ago, there was like 9 tiers of relics, and they stripped them back to six. They've since added a new tier for every expansion and every, I think, part expansion. With Helm's Deep, they'll be adding a 10th tier of relics, and the stat increase is so minimal, and yet the grind to actually get to that tier is exorbitant. I think the best word of using is, it's just it's disgusting the amount of
Well,
grind it takes to get a perfect legendary item.
well, I don't know why so many people are obsessed with getting a perfect legendary item, but I never worried about it.
I actually do try to get a perfect restart every so often. And yes, you can hold out for those really awesome weapons, but the fact that you get, slightly better weapons every so often, the fact that you get thousands of legendary items from level 50 to 60, let alone level 50 to cap, is not really they don't feel special. I get more legendary items than I do normal weapons. That's a problem. That shouldn't be the case. I mean, at least reduce the drop rate on them. Now that being said, I know burglars have a hard time finding legendary items. At least Spydra does, and so they might, certain classes might have a harder time getting them.
Well, I
But I
don't
know for
think,
champions,
yeah.
they drop like candy. So
Well, as far as I can tell, they seem to drop on me about evenly for each of the classes.
okay,
For me, at
Now, the
least.
trouble is getting the type of item you want, because if you have a large variety of items you want, then getting one that you like. For example, with a warden, I like spears, but wardens can use such a large variety of weapons that the odds of getting a spear when you get a legendary weapon are relatively small.
right.
I think this is probably a rather radical viewpoint, but the way I see it, the current LI system, it just isn't working. It's not
Okay,
legendary, it's not exciting, and it isn't fun. In
all
my
right.
opinion, they need to go back to the basics, strip it down, and start from the beginning.
Okay. I think this is not the time to have a long drawn out discussion on the legendary item system. Perhaps we should
I
save
would
that for another
agree, but
episode.
the fact that they are extending it another, 10 levels, they didn't plan. At least I don't think they planned to keep adding on to it after Moria. It was kind of like, okay, we designed it for Moria, and then with Mirkwood they added onto it, and you got another 5 levels onto it, and then you got more levels onto it, and I think it kind of spiraled a little bit out of their control, and it's at the point where it would take a revamp in order to make legendary items special again. It's a great system. I like the system, but it doesn't it has so much more potential to make those weapons feel so special, and right now they just aren't. Anyway, Pine Leaf, you have been jumping at the toes to go to your section that you just added to the show notes while we were talking. So why don't you go ahead and talk about the thing that you know most?
I decided to check out what has changed relating to skirmishes. I know, surprise, surprise, surprise. Obviously, as far as I can tell, there aren't too many changes in the skirmishes themselves. They, of course, are about the same. The type of changes we get are to the skirmish camp, for example. I found that there is a new vendor there, and that is a mithril vendor. I know, last thing we needed is a mithril vendor. And the mithril vendor sells items for mithril coins, items that were tended to be covered in the store in the past. So I suspect that many of those consumables that used to be in the store are now covered by the mithril vendor. And these are things such as the soldier summonings, recon summoning soldier with while in combat, those things. That's a consumable that you can get. You can think, for example, 7 coins, you get 5 summonings. And so each of them is consumed on use. Then there is the recon item, which reduces the cooldown for giving orders to it, something that I never ever get. And soldier cooldowns, things like that. What was the name of the reducing the cooldown for your, oh yes, that's right, your landscape soldier. So anything that relates to the skirmish like that is now can be sold through it, that if you were expecting it in the store in the past. And the other thing that I of course demonstrated was how the warden works in an actual skirmish. So you could see, has the class system affected me much in how I'm doing a skirmish? And in there a couple of times I do switch between my builds, between the tanking stance versus the recklessness stance. And one of the things I found here is that recklessness actually works now. In the past, I could never get it to work right. But in this case, I used the recklessness stance everywhere except when fighting the encounters, and it seemed to work pretty well. And that's it for skirmish changes. So now let's look at Andang's landscape videos.
Yeah, myself and Etheros went on to beta to look at each of the different landscapes, and Pineleaf was too busy to join us, so we just moved on without him.
Yes, I was too busy doing videos for...
Yeah, you were too busy helping us get more content, so thank you for that. But yeah, let's go ahead and talk in general about the landscape. Thalros, you've been talking a lot about landscape. You said that the landscape and story are your favorite parts of LOTRO. What are your thoughts on the different regions? Why don't you go one by one, and we'll add in our commentary along with you.
There's so many things I could say about it. I think the landscape for West Rohan in general is head and shoulders above anything they've done in LOTRO to date.
I would agree
I mean that
with
in
that.
both graphical quality, textures and everything, and the way they build the landscape. I think the key word, and we'll probably bring it up a few times, is scale. Everything just feels bigger.
Yeah, I don't know how to point it out, but you just feel like for the first time since Bree and the Shire, you feel like you're in Middle Earth again. And you kind of felt that come back with the first part of Rohan. You really feel it come back with this expansion. A lot of that's because of the lore areas, the huge lore areas that are there. A lot of that is because of the huge scale that these areas demand. And Turbine went to that scale above and beyond. I'd say with Helm's Deep, it's actually possibly bigger than I imagined in my head.
I think if we were to start with Kingstead, I think is the first initial area. I think those open fields, and then when you get to Edris, you can look out over the whole place with the mountains, very large mountains behind you. Everything, I don't know exactly how they did it, but I feel like I'm in a huge kingdom rather than a game of a huge kingdom.
Yeah, you actually feel like you're in Rohan. You never in all of Middle Earth in Lotro have you felt like you're in a kingdom. That's because there hasn't really been a kingdom to be feeling like you're a part of.
Yeah,
And it's great to finally feel like you're in Rohan. And the cool part is that this area feels so much different than the previous part. I was worried that it'd be feel very similar, but the scale's much larger. It has even more diversity than the previous area, and it's just a great area to be in.
Yep, and Edris especially, which is obviously the jewel of the Kingstead area. It's just incredible how big it is, and yet how open at the same time. It's a very different thing from Bree.
Yeah, it's really, really spread out, and that's because they actually have their horses able to graze in the city, and that's actually from the books, I believe. And you just you could easily fit in 3 or 4 breeds in Edoras. That's the size of this place, and it it doesn't necessarily feel that big because it's a lot more open, um, and so you're able to see that. But if you look on the map, it's easy to tell that it's so much bigger than Bree.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll calm down the lag a little bit. That you well,
Mm.
of course, it's not the high end area, seeing how the place gets evacuated, but
Yeah,
I
I have a
think
feeling it'll still be a hub though.
yeah.
I just like Bree is still a hub. There's no way that players are not going to fill out Edoras, just like there's no way that all the raiders and people and high-end crafters and stuff won't fill out the old capital of Rohan that's also coming with this region and is supposed to be the hub.
yeah, Oldberg.
Hmm.
I think the other thing they've really nailed, I think, really since East Rohan and Fangorn, is forests. I think the difference between the old forest, which is pretty much a maze of cardboard trees, really, that you can't walk through, it's just it feels a lot more dense and yet, well, not so barring to you as the old forest was. Fangorn, and then the Balewood in Wildemore, and then there's a forest in uh, the Eastfold too. It feels like a forest that you could wander around in.
Yeah, definitely. And let's go ahead and talk about the Paths of the Dead.
What does it say? It's very uninviting.
I
Well, it's
have to
intended
say,
to be uninviting.
they got that area perfectly done, in my opinion. It feels like the Paths of the Dead, and you feel like you don't want to go there. And if you do get close to it, you die because of the dread, or you lose your morale. You don't die in Lotro, but you get intense loss of morale, and that's pretty realistic to how the Paths of the Dead are, especially as a normal human hobbit. Elves maybe not so much, but dwarves, as well. And so, you're supposed to feel a lot of fear for that, and you do. So that was a really well designed area, and I don't think there's too many quests that take you up there, but which is good because you don't have to go back up that cross path over and over again. But they did a great job with the cross path and the switch path.
Dunharrow.
Yeah, and just a great job with that region as a whole. And you don't realize how big Rohan is until you take the back road there. Um, that goes back behind the whole area, and it's just a single path, and there's not much on it, but it takes forever to go across that thing, and you don't realize how huge this area is, and that's only like I think it was like a third or 2/3 of the entire zone, and so it's just amazing how massive this area is.
Yeah, I think we took that path like 3 or 4 times during the beta, and it just took so long.
Yeah, and then there's the Eastfold.
Yeah, just touched on that just now, but yeah, it's a lot more natural than the other zones. There isn't so much devastation. It's probably the safest one because obviously Isengard can't get far enough to it. The threat is from a different place.
Well, they're
It,
still getting into that zone. They still have
yeah,
enemies
slightly.
there, but it's nothing like the ravaging that's going on in the rest of the areas. And that place is really interesting because it has a Rohirrim village that's just built on the swamp area there, and it looks like nothing that we've seen from the Rohirrim. And I really love that city because of the design of it.
Yeah,
The art design definitely deserves a hat off for
it's
that one.
the Eastfold is probably the most pretty of the five, obviously because there isn't so much death in it, but also because this like the flora and all that. It looks really nice. Very good screenshot material for the whole area.
And we didn't even talk about the tombs of the kings earlier. I forgot
Oh,
in right around Edoras, and that is perfect. They did a
It's
fantastic
symbolic
job
of
with
the
that.
detail they have. It is. It's the
Hmm.
best example you can come up with.
And each of the different tombstones has different carvings on it, and it's just amazing the amount of detail that they went to with that.
Hmm.
And I guess next is the stone deans, right?
Yes. That is the mining area of West Rohan, and it's also one that's kind of got some intermingling with the Dunlendings, which is a very interesting plot point for the whole zone. I think as you go through it, you'll see quite a few. It's a lot more rough. There's lots of stone, and there isn't so much flat grassland as the other areas. There are quite a few mines there too, which are very high up, to say the least.
Is that the area where there's that bridge that is pretty iconic, or is that somewhere else?
That is the one with the bridge, I believe, and it's the one with the larger orc camp too.
Yes, the large orc camp, and it's not too filled out, but there it is a big, big encampment, and yeah, definitely something to be careful around.
Hmm.
All right, and then there's the west, or yeah,
Broadacres.
Westfold. Well, there's
Hmm.
also Broadacres. Let's go to that first.
The main story thing we know about the Broadacres is it's where the Miras, the horse kings, I suppose you could call them, really, come from.
Yes,
So obviously it's the place most suited for them. So the grass is usually quite flat. It has a portion of Fangorn in it, and I believe there's a very large Gondorian ruin to the north as well,
there is.
which
Yes.
probably comes up in the quests.
Yeah, it's just interesting how each of these zones are so different, but the zone as a whole feels so tied together. They did a great job with it.
Yeah, that is the main thing because I think a couple of the older zones, Enerdwaith and Mirkwood, they kind of have lots of variety in them, but they don't tie together very well. The Mornshaws, I think, in Enerdwaith, you can see like the divide between each area is very clear.
Yeah. And then we have Rohan, which it does have a lot of diversity, but not near as much as Inidwaith, Mirkwood, and now Western Rohan.
Hmm.
And so Western Rohan, I think, is the most diverse and yet well blended zone that we've had.
Yeah, that's the best way of putting it.
Thank you. All right, and then there's the Westfold. And this is the place that is extremely devastated because it is right in the backyard of Isengard, and Saruman is not a happy guy when it comes to people getting in his way. And so they're on the path from Isengard straight down to Helm's Deep because it is a straight line down there. It is just village after village, farmland after farmland, in complete fire and complete ruin. It's
Hmm.
beyond any type of devastation that we've seen anywhere in Lotro, and you really see the destruction that is going on. You don't really see that to this extent anywhere else except for maybe Wildermoor, but not even this bad. Because at least in Wildermoor, the structures are still standing for the most part, and there's still places people can go. But here, it's just this entire area is just completely wiped out, and it is
Hmm.
amazing. And then there's the Ford, which has the most death and despair that I think we've seen anywhere in Lotro.
Yeah, I think that point and the burnt town of Martin, I believe it's called
It is,
Martin.
yeah.
Yeah, is just absolutely destroyed. There is nothing left of it that could be salvaged.
I mean, there's literally nothing left, but there's still these, burnt, just ash ruins.
Husks more than anything
Yeah,
else. Yeah.
it's amazing the first time you go see it. It really is.
So you're saying that Saruman's not a nice guy?
That's the rumor.
Yes, okay.
It's going on at recess, That's the rumor. Anyway, um, and then there's my favorite area that is coming, which is a subset of the Westfold, but it's big enough for me to consider separate. It's Helm's Deep, and
It's the crown jewel of the whole expansion, really, in terms of
oh, by
landscape.
far, I could stay in Helm's Deep for the rest of LOTRO. I don't see how people stay in Bree, but I tell you what, I'm moving into Helm's Deep. I'm going to be role playing there. People are going to be at level 200, and I'm going to still be at Helm's Deep having a party. Man, I gotta say they did it. I don't want to overuse the word perfect because I've already said that several times, but they do such a great job at getting it really, really accurate to the lore. And there's just so much that is going on here, but one of the more interesting things is that they did take a focus to and went out of their way to make it look Gondorian, and then make it look like the Rohirrim are kind of in it, because you can see the wood structures of the Rohirrim and the stone of the Gondorians, and that adds a lot of depth to the area. And then just
They're
how
sort of building on
huge,
top of it.
just how huge this area is from the dike to the wall is an amazingly large area. It's large enough for 30,000 orcs to fit in the fifth battle. It is huge, and it's just going there. You don't expect it to be that big. And then behind the wall, from the wall to the glowing caves, it's another huge area. It's just an immense, immense place. And then there's all the big mountains around, which is another thing we didn't talk about, is that because we're closer to Isengard, we're closer to the mountain range, and that adds to the scope of the place, because in Eastern Rohan it's kind of flat. There's not much that goes on in the distance. Here you see mountains all around, and it adds to the scale, I think, quite a bit.
And just like West Rohan, while also having a very huge scale, they also have a very good eye for detail. Each of those little towers and the rooms inside them is unique. They each serve different purpose. They have a bunch of soldiers doing things, and then you can see them working and patrolling, and it feels like a fortress at work instead of one that's just sitting there waiting to be attacked.
Yeah, it really does. And like I said, I could just stay there forever. It feels like it should. It really does. One thing that they did mention is that, which this is something we actually didn't talk about, was in the IGN video they did mention that this could have been a misspeak by the devs, but they did say that we will be able to go into the glowing caves without doing an epic battle.
The glittering caves.
And so
that you could go on with those.
The glittering caves are the most beautiful caves in LOTRO by far, and it's just for an epic battle, but man, they put a lot of work into it. They put so much work into it. I'd say is because, with the other epic battles, you have to build Helm's Deep either way, whether you have the epic battles or not. With the Glittering Caves, they did not have to build this area, because originally they were not planning to allow players to even go there outside of the epic battle. That's not the case anymore, and so they've fleshed out this huge area that feels like a really beautiful Moria, is the best way to describe it, I think.
I think, and that's partly why they need to allow people to visit it outside of the battle, because not only is it a lore area, and quite a fairly significant one, you can see they've put so much work into it. It deserves to be shown off.
Yeah, there's all new. They even mentioned in one of the article interviews that there's all new technology that they use to get the caves to glitter right and to get the lighting to work well. They put a lot of work into this area, and it's not talked about enough. And a lot of people are not paying much attention to it based on article view numbers and stuff like that. So. It's an amazing place, and I recommend people go check it out, especially if it's available, if it really will be available on the just normal server without having to go into Epic Battle.
Mm-hmm.
All right, anything else on Helm's Deep or the landscape in general?
I think we've said quite a lot already.
I think we did. All right, so Etheros, I'm going to let you finish off our beta talk talking about PvP. You did spend a little bit of time on there. Just go over the general basics and your thoughts and hopes on the system.
All right. As far as PvP goes, creep changes are quite minimal at this time. They have reduced a whole bunch of creep cooldowns like they have for creeps. Some of them have been a bit overly reduced, but that will be tuned in time, I imagine. What they've also done is speed up creep skills, so everything feels faster again, just like on creep side. They've also added set bonuses to creep corruptions and added doubled actually the amount of slots you can get. I think this is intended to add a little more customizability to creep side, which it frankly lacks quite a bit of. It's
Yeah,
not
there's really not that much that you
there's
can do to make your character feel special, and so adding these extra corruptions will add a lot more diversity to the creeps for sure.
yeah, it's still quite a lot of changes creeps still need, but these do help, I think, a bit. I think the other thing is that with these free class changes, a few skills that have been quite a point of debate. I mean, just for the Lawmaster, I can think of the long damage over time durations and the stun immunity have been quite noticeably reduced. Whether that's purely for the sake of PvP, and I know a lot of people don't really hate that thing, I can't say for me personally, but I am either way. I'm happy that those things are being done the way they are. Now, of course, there are new things being introduced that may well be even worse, Sikkim, as we discussed earlier, but there is some kind of progress.
Yeah, and they've also increased their health and stuff like that that they do every time.
Yeah,
And I'd
traditional
say it's
stuff there.
probably even more percentage-wise than it was before, at least on my defiler. So definitely some interesting changes going on there. All right, anything
I
else to
just hope
add?
that I'm just hoping that in a following update after they've settled the creep changes a bit more, that creeps get a well-deserved change because that is something that has kind of messed up the balance before in that they start off the expansion with creeps at their height because the creeps are still learning things and their gear isn't great and stuff like that. And then after they get their first stages and their get buffs and all that, creeps don't get anything to compensate for it. Like you think update 10, creeps got their first stages, they got the new gear from Erebor, and creeps actually got nerfed in that same update, and it completely turned around the balance and it threw it in the toilet.
Yeah, and
That's the sort of thing I hope they.
people just haven't been getting on, at least on Landable, because of that. So definitely,
Yeah,
definitely
I'm
important to
hoping.
hopefully keep the balance.
Yeah, I hope they learned from that this year and they adjust creeps with free stats.
Yep. And real quick, to finish out this section, I think it'd be good if everyone would mention one change that they'd want to do currently from beta. If you can change one thing from beta that that Turbine is doing differently, so legendary items excluded. These are just changes that are coming with the expansion. One thing that you could change, either small or big, what would it be? And Pine Leaf.
I would say if there was one thing that would change, that would be that there would be more options for group epic battles than we currently have.
That's a good one. Atheros.
I would be inclined to go with Pine Leaf's one as well. I don't think there's anything else that I would really want more than that. Aside from maybe that's pretty much it, actually.
Yeah, I haven't played all the classes, so I don't know if they're really well balanced or not. That's my hope and change is that they will continue to try really hard to make them as balanced as possible and as fun as possible, because that's the key is trying to make them as fun. And then also, along with what Pineleaf said as well, because that is very, very important to open those up because in my opinion, at least, the larger group ones are the more interesting epic battles because things get much, much more hectic as you gain the extra scale, especially in the braid. That one is very hectic. All right, so We only have one piece of LOTRO Players news this week because Brax was too busy to give his pick of the week. But we do have the Helm's Deep giveaway that will close on November 12th. All you have to do is leave a comment. It's that simple. There's already, I think, 340 entries, but that is much, much better odds than the leveling contest. So be sure to leave a comment and try to win the expansion before it launches on the 18th. All right, and Pineleaf, if you want to cover donations.
Yes, donations. Let's give a big thanks to Whiteberry for providing us with a $10 or more donation to LOTRO Players. And all she says is, I sent a small $10 donation today, and thanks for a great site and podcast. Nice and clear. And if you want to also get a mention, then you could go to LOTRO Players and simply press the donate button on the donation page, and you can help support us. If you give us a $5 donation, you will get a mention on the podcast of your choice, a $10 or more donation, and you would get a mention on all our current active podcasts. However many we currently have, I sometimes lose track.
Just go back and listen to a previous episode and you can hear Pineleaf mention them all.
Yes. And we also have some feedback, yes. Unfortunately, no reviews.
That's right, but everyone can leave a review on iTunes, and we would much appreciate it because that is how you gain traffic on iTunes, is by going there and leaving a review. And yeah, whatever you want to give us in stars, we'd appreciate 5 stars though. But
Yeah.
We'd like it whatever you give us.
Right. And we had a good comment from Akazia Songweaver, who on episode 19 loved it. Is really an enjoyable panel of players. Very informative and fun.
Thanks, Acacia.
Very well, and we also have some emails. Hey, LOTRO players, Salo here. I stumbled over this thread on the forums about Helm's Deep housing chest changes coming with the release of Helm's Deep. 2 significant takeaways are that housing storage will function more like a personal vault and the costs associated with the tier. He gives a link and a bit of a summary in there. This is essentially saying that when you buy your house, you can get the first 15 spaces for 1 gold, the next 15 spaces for 5 gold, and it multiplies by 5 for the next 2 after that. So it's 25 for the next 15, 125 for the next 15 after that. And then after that, you could use mithril in order to get more, 100 mithril coins each.
Okay, I would like something to be clarified here. Is what this is saying in that compared to live, would you need to spend gold to get up to the same point when Helm's Deep launches? Or is it on top of what you already start
Well,
with?
what I went to just before this episode, went onto Bull Roarer and purchased a house. When I purchased the house, there were already 30 slots there. Now, I don't know whether it is because I had already owned a house and had already had storage there, or if it's just that you start out with 30. But I noticed, though, that to get the next one after that cost me 25 gold.
Okay. So it does jump up there. So for a new player, it'd probably be 5 gold, then I would assume.
Yeah, so I don't know what would happen if you never owned a house, because when I went in there and purchased the house, I had already 30 there, and it pre-populated it with the stuff that I had on live, with the stuff that I had burnt. I had assumed when I went in there that all that stuff would have disappeared, but apparently all the escrow stuff got dumped in there.
Yeah, I still don't quite understand how this thing works in that with this money you're spending would compare someone who buys a house after Helm's Deep to someone who has one before it. Will the person who buys a house after it have to spend more money to get to the same point as someone who already owns the house? Because if
Um,
That's
so,
what.
then that seems like a pretty severe problem to me.
Yeah. It does sound like I can't remember how many slots you get currently on live.
but I mean, honestly, as a as a high-level character, 125 gold is not a whole lot. It is a lot of money, but it is not a whole lot because LOTRO's economy system, in my opinion at least, doesn't take up that much gold, especially within the last 10 levels or so. They've really boosted up the amount of money you get. And I'm assuming that's going to continue with Helm's Deep. So
Oh,
once you get to 95 or even beyond that, 125 gold might not be that much money for the high level
well,
players.
it probably depend on which server it is. On
That's true as
Winfola,
well.
I don't think it'll be a problem, but when I am on Langeville, I don't think I got quite that much money.
There has been some very severe inflation in recent years, I think, and it's probably only going to get more with Helm's Deep in that the trash you get from mobs will probably give you more money than it does in pretty lower levels, so that alone will
And
probably make it
personally,
easier.
and I don't use the auction house, but personally, I do use the auction house, but not that much. But personally, I think that the economy in Lotro has always been towards giving you more gold than you need, at least after level 50, especially. Um, and so it's good to see some things that cost a lot of money. Now, that being said, the 100 mithril coins for the next several ranks, I don't know how I feel about that, but
Yeah, and that's for one server.
it is only one server. That's right, yeah. So that makes it even worse, I think. So, I don't know. What do you guys think on the pricing of this?
I think it is too much. At least the top one is 125. It's too much. I think how they should do it is 1G for the first, then 5, then 10, and then 25. It sounds more reasonable to me, at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah, that would be good, especially since they're going from hardly any gold to 125 gold. It's a big, big jump.
Yeah, it
And
seems a
so,
bit.
yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, that's a good one.
And then the mithril coins, I don't really care. I just don't at all, really. So there's that.
Yeah, I don't think I currently use my housing storage enough to want to bother spending mythical coins in order to upgrade my storage in my house.
Yeah, and then he does finish up by saying that this has not been officially confirmed or denied by Turbine, but it is uh, prices that are currently going on beta. And he signs off very interesting solo of Landerville. So thank you so much for writing into us. Yeah.
Very well, and that's
Because
it.
too long to respond. So you
Yes,
can so you can
yes,
contact us. You can
right.
email us at lotroplayers.mymiddleearth@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter at lotroplayers. You can follow Andang at pvmp_andang. You can follow Brax Wolf at Braxwolf, not Braxwood. Don't listen to that crazy stuff that Pinely's been spewing out the last couple weeks. And then you can follow Draculetta at Draculetta_72. You can follow Ethelros at Ethelros, and you can follow Pineleaf at some undisclosed Twitter account that we will soon be discovering once again. And if you followed a previous Twitter account, we're terribly sorry for any type of things that may have occurred from those accounts that may or may not be Pineleaf's. All right, and final thoughts. I would like to give a huge thanks to Acacia for our new podcast intro and ending music. She actually wrote it specifically for this show. I sent her an email asking if she would be willing to do that, and she blew me away with the music that she came out with, and definitely a big, big thanks to her. We will be using this music for definitely a long time to come, and yeah, definitely really cool music, and hopefully those of you that are listening live will also go back and listen to the podcast either this week or in some future week just to hear her amazing music because she did a great job, I think, with the intro music. What do you guys think?
It sounds like I was expecting you to play it like they did on Casual Stroll to Mordor, so that when you're on live, they'd be able to hear it.
Sorry, Pineleaf, I'm not that magical, okay?
Yeah, you disappointed me.
I'm
Yeah, I
sorry.
was actually hoping to hear it as well, but yeah.
Sorry. Sorry, you have to listen to the podcast. That's the only way. We have to make them feel special too, you know. All right, Pineleaf, close us out.
Fine. Very well. Thank you, everyone, for listening. This is Pine Leaf Needles, and return for us next week at 8:30 for the next episode of LOTRO Players News, which would be the last episode before the release of Helm's Deep. So until then, this is Pine Leaf Needles, and remember to skirmish responsibly.
Thanks, everybody.
See you.